I am unashamed. What about you?
So welcome back to the Unashamed podcast, our trio of Bible study warriors.
And we're family.
And we're family. Zach, you're our family. We're just a Louisiana family with you from North Carolina. Have we told you we loved you lately?
No, yeah. In fact, Jase has never told me that. So not only lately, ever.
I'm saving that for that special moment.
I'm waiting. I am waiting.
Well, hey, 1 John. We gotta love one another.
Gotta love one another. That's exactly where we're at. I like that he's doing it out of a compulsion, Zach, of a command to love you.
Yeah, I'll take what I can get. You know what I mean?
Well,
beggars can't be choosers.
When I tell someone I love them, I have 1 Corinthians 13 in mind.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you say that, that is a responsibility.
It is.
I mean, when you think about the definition of love,
It's
not
deep.
easily angered. It
Right.
keeps no record of wrongs. It does not rejoice in evil. I mean,
One of the message, I use that a lot when I'm doing weddings and read that text, and it says it doesn't revel when others grovel, which is a pretty good point. In other words, you don't
good.
rejoice when other people are hurting. So I thought it was pretty good. Yeah, that's a good point, Jase, because that's exactly where we're going to be at later today in
it's
1 John 3.
a central component of 1 John. But I wanted to share, I had a day off yesterday, and so we got the band together, kind of figuratively, because Murray had a surgery, not sure on what body part. When you start getting into your 80s,
Things are breaking down,
Yeah.
such as that.
and so he's like, "Hey, I just need to get out and go." So we planned on a little treasure hunt, and he wound up not being able to go because the wind. I don't know if you noticed this yesterday, Al. The wind was blowing,
Yeah.
I would say, at 30 to 40 miles
It
an hour.
was, it reminded me of being on the Gulf Coast, where I see wind like that. You don't see it that much up here. I was nervous about it because there's still a few hanging limbs here and there, and I was
Well,
like, "Whoa!"
Fortunately, I was in a place where there were no limbs because I was in fields as far as the eye could see.
It's where you want to be right now.
And I have a good relationship with a farmer over there, and I got his son into duck hunting. There's more than one way to get an invite, Zach. And when you have a farmer who has a lot of land and his son wants to get into duck hunting, I thought, I'll take care of his duck hunting needs, and we'll have an unmentioned trade here. I just need access because he don't care. He's farming. He's like, go out there and find anything you want. And so when I did that, it was then the catalyst. He sent me that text. He's like, you got a green light to anything I own. Knock yourself out. So we were out there at these fields, and so me and Randy went. Randy, I call him Randy Redneck. He worked for us on Duck Family Treasure. And he was like our key grip because these Hollywood people, they're like, hey, let's do a TV show. Problem is, none of them knows how to be a survivor in a redneck world. Right. They're like, we'll go to a place, and it's like, what are we going to do when we're not treasure hunting? Well, we fish and we do all these things, but they have no idea of that concept.
Right.
So I needed a scout to where it's like, Randy, you go to these places where we're going to treasure hunt, and then you figure out what we're going to do in the spare time. So we needed a guy. So he was kind of working for them. He'd haul all our stuff over there so we didn't have to carry it. So and we actually turned him around because I was like, this is one of the most funny human beings I've ever met. I mean, the excitement level of Randy when he finds something. I love treasure hunting with him. He's just like a little kid out there, just, let's get it. So we go out there in a field that we've hunted, I'd say, 12 times, and I sent you a picture. I've hunted this place 12 times. Did you get the picture, Zach?
Yeah, I did. All the bullets and all the.
Look, that was Murray just calling me when I picked up my phone. He can't get over it because we sent him that picture.
Oh, and he didn't get to go?
No, he didn't get to go because the wind was so bad that I'm going to have to send him a message. If he only knew that I'm talking about him right now.
So those are all bullets?
Well, let me look at what I sent you. So the vast majority of them, look, I found all that, and the lovely Maddie will put that picture up. I found most of that stuff in an hour in one spot.
Wow.
Here's what's funny.
So that was a little campsite or something.
I found a campsite because, look, we hunted where we've always hunted. We weren't finding anything, so I was like, take off that way, Randy. I'll take off this way. If we find something good, we'll call each other. That was the plan. He has his phone, I have my phone, but we have earphones on. And so, I go over there, look, I find a bullet. And then I look around and I see 2 or 3 laying on top of the ground.
Wow.
I thought, ooh. And then it's just bang, 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 bang. I just start finding stuff. Well, I start calling Randy. Well, I'm seeing Randy. He's 700-800 yards away. It's just, it's as far as you could see field. But he's pointing the other direction. And he's not answering his phone because he's listening, looking. Well, I went back to hunting. Then I'd stop and call him. He's not paying attention to his phone, which is understandable.
Yeah.
And so finally, after I found about 3/4 of that, I just start, every so often, I would look at him and start waving my arms. And finally, I saw his hand go up because he saw me. And so here he comes. Looked like he was running on the rows.
Yeah.
Here he comes, wide open across the field. Mm-hmm. But by the time he got there, I didn't realize this was a very small place that I had discovered that previously was undiscovered. And so, of course, he didn't find much because I'd done it.
So some of these were necklaces because I can see the hole in them, right? They wore it around their neck, you think? These ones with the little hole in them?
Necklaces.
Like, see those right there? See how they got the little hole?
Oh. Well,
when do you think that would have been?
Possible. That was the stuff in my hand. They weren't necklaces per se. Maybe there's one of them. One of them is a little tag that had Providence because we were in Lake Providence. One of them is a tax token in my hand.
Yeah.
And none of this has been cleaned up. And one of them is a spur, Al.
Yeah, I see that. What's that the red wheel thing?
Well, that was a plastic thing that was just laying on top of the ground. I didn't find that with my detector. It was because there was a little house site right next to it. It's real small.
Yeah.
But it was like early 1900s. But all that Civil War stuff.
And those are all Civil War bullets, right? That's what that is.
They are.
And I still some balls in there too.
The round ball, musket balls, or whatever they call them.
Yeah.
But
it
was
something, Jase. That's impressive.
It was. Look,
that had to have been fun.
It was so much fun, and somewhere that we had about a 30, 40 degree temperature change. And so when we first got out there, I had a jacket on, and look, it was weighing my bag down so much I couldn't. It was pulling my pants down. It went from cold to hot. I was sweating, and all of a sudden, a pain hit me. And I was like, Randy, because we're pretty close to a highway, and we're out in ball open field. And, it's like Zach's so obsessed with AI and all this. It's not going to tell you how to take care of that problem.
Not yet.
Because I got a problem here, and I'm about half a mile from my truck. There's no trees. There's a highway. I'm a famous person. And I'm like, I got to make it to that truck. And I've got to go drive somewhere.
Yeah.
And because I had a
Because you just got out there on the side of the road. This winds up a viral video.
Oh, yeah. And I was thinking that. Well, here's what's funny. I didn't mean to tell this story because I know this is lowbrow humor. It wasn't funny to me because a pain had hit me. And so I'm carrying this, 8 pounds of baggage, and I'm sweating. I have a jacket on, and I was just like, I'm not sure I'm going to pull this off. I go to the truck and I start getting delirious, I mean, the pain is just rapidly accelerating. This guy has a lot of access, and I thought to, property. So I was like, got to find somewhere in this field that has a group of trees. So I'm driving sporadically down the highway.
Remember old Blue, the lab dog we had that had really good instincts but really bad manners?
He was the best retriever I've ever seen.
Yep.
Terrible manners.
And Dad would always defend him because he was such a good lad. We understand that, right? Dogs, they show up for us every day. We love our pets. And so our good friend, Dr. Dennis Black, has come up with a product called Rough Greens. The problem is, as they get a little bit older, they get a little slower, a little pickier. Their stomachs can have a lot of issues. And traditional dog food is missing the needed ingredients: probiotics, enzymes, omega oils, and the key, live vitamins and minerals that your dog needs to digest and absorb food. Rough Greens is America's #1 dog supplement, and you sprinkle it right on their food. It's packed with all the live nutrients that they need. It's all natural. It's made right here in the USA. Rough Greens is helping dogs feel younger, more energetic, and healthier than they have in years, and your dog could be one of them. I have 3 in my house that love Rough Greens. They line up.
Hazel and Buddy, they just hear the bag rustling and they know the sound and they start the booty shake.
So we've noticed in our dogs healthier, shinier coats as well as just overall happiness. So we love that. Get a free Jumpstart trial bag for your dog. You just cover the shipping. Go to roughgreens.com. Use the discount code UNASHAMED. Rough Greens. We make any dog food better.
Look, there's a little grove of cypress trees, like a couple hundred yards from the road. And I was like, I remember that spot because I can go below the surface. It was a little creek bottom.
I was going to say, if there's cypress, there had to be water.
Here's what's fun. Here's where this got funny. I pull off on the side of the road, get out paper towels. Now I've taken off, the bag, the jacket, and I take off. But everybody that's driving down the road, they all know who I am.
Yeah.
They're blowing the horn.
Oh, boy.
As I'm running across the field, I hear people hollering, rolling down the window.
You're not running to a meet and greet.
They know what's happening. If you see a man running across a field carrying a whole roll of paper towels, you don't have to have any explanation. Headed toward a grove of trees. I literally jumped down the bank. Jumped.
Oh, gosh.
Out of sight. Nothing sticking up by my head.
The only good news about this, Jase, is because the state you were in that current moment, it wasn't going to be long. You weren't going to be there long.
Oh, it was gone in 60 seconds. It's like that movie.
You know what's funny? What's funny, Zach, is that someone in Lake Providence in about 2 or 3 months is on their podcast is going to be stalking what they see in this cypress grove.
Oh no, Al, that's safe. Look, in fact, here's what's funny. When I get back to my truck, the farmer pulls up, and he's like, "What are you doing?" Because he was looking at me. I didn't have my equipment on. He's like, "Well, y'all hunted here many times." I was like, "No, I was hunting down there in the ball open field." I was like, I had a pain, and what I want to recommend is stay away from that little cypress.
Give that area a minute.
Yeah. Give it a couple days and it'll be all right. But so anyway, it was fun, but we laughed about it and we went back to hunting.
They don't, and for treasure hunting, they don't have the porta potties just nearby.
I don't know what else you could do.
Yeah, that's tough.
It happens.
So it's funny you mentioned. So while you were doing that, I don't know if I've ever talked about on the podcast, but I have some prostate issues from time to time. And so I went in to see my checkup, see the doctor, and Hannah is her name. She's like a PA. And so she said, we're going to have to do another MRI on you. And I was like, oh, man, because I told her, I said, well, look, here's the deal. I know we got to do it, but I made myself and the Almighty God a promise the last time I was in that machine that I would never get in here again and get cooped up in this these things are brutal.
Yeah, it looks like a coffin.
Yeah,
I'm
very claustrophobic, and so I made it through it by the grace of God. But I'm telling you, I prayed the whole time. I sweated. You talk about sweating. So I said, I got to do something different. Like, there's got to be some alternative. She said, well, I think they got these more open ones around. We'll call around and find out. I said, well, look, because I'm not doing that again. So whatever has to happen, we got to do something different. I know I have to have it, but so her little guy calls him back and said, well, we can't really find what you're looking for. So Zach gave me the idea. When you said Murray, it made me think to tell the story. So it's Murray's son-in-law is a doctor.
Yeah.
And a neurologist is what he does. But he's the guy that knows people and knows things. So I texted him. I said, hey, your old pal Al needs your assistance. Give me a call. So he sends me, so that was several hours. And finally later, he sends me a text back, said, Al, question. Like he didn't know who it was. Of course, it's been a minute since I've texted Blake. So I said Robertson. So he called me right up. He said, I didn't know that was your number. You know, you hadn't talked to him in a while. I said, yeah, I know. I said, how long have you been married? Here was my lead in. I said, how long have you been married? He said, 25 years this year, which is hard to believe. I did his wedding and his premarital counseling, and he was in medical school at that point. I said, do you remember what I told you when you were going to give me like some little measly, Chili's gift card or something for doing your wedding and your thing? And you remember what I told you? I wouldn't take it. And he said, you said one day when you're a doctor, you'll have a need.
You'll cash it in.
And you'll cash it in. He said, is this the day? I said, this is the day. The favor I need is from you. So I told him my situation, and he said, I can take care of it. And I was like, because they do a sedated version of it. They don't really advertise it, I think, because they'd rather you just suffer through it. But they can sedate you to do an MRI in these machines, because some people are like me, or you just can't. I couldn't do it again. I did it once.
I think it's in our DNA. I get in the elevator and I'm like,
yeah, I don't like it. I don't like it. I'd rather walk the steps if I can. A lot of times Lisa will get in one, I'll be like, especially if you're in Europe, they're so small.
Yeah,
I'm like, no, stairs. I'll just carry whatever I got. Yeah. So he sometimes you got to cash it in. Jase. I've got two other physicians that I did their weddings as well, and I told them the same thing. So I got a couple of more favors to cash in. Zach is like the godfather of ministry.
Yeah.
One day I'll have a need, and then I'll call that need in. So I'm waiting to hear back.
You got a Rolodex of needs.
That's right. And that's the way it worked. That was the old way.
So what I would have done is I would have just got on Claude or ZachGPT and said, find me what I'm looking for.
Zach, I really think you're overly obsessive about the coming AI. I tried to cover this when I talked about the DI.
Oh, Jill got mad at me about it. I can't talk. I have nowhere to go. I can't talk about it on here. I can't talk about it with my wife. So I'm like,
well, for our viewers, Zach brought this up before the podcast started. I'm like, Zach, we covered this. We're off that, because Zach kept saying it's the future.
It's the future.
I'm like, I covered the future that you need to be concerned about is when Jesus appears. We may be confident and unashamed before him at his coming.
We shall be like him.
I'm concerned about that. That's my primary concern. But you can have secondary and tertiary concerns as well along the way.
I don't even know what that is.
We don't even have our little button anymore for words like that.
Well, I will say this. I showed you that picture, and we're studying 1 John, and we're at this point where, we went through when he appears, we shall be like him. Yep. I mean, everything's kind of made right. Now, he made it right by becoming a human, showing us how to live, dying for our sins, being raised, which is what we've been talking about. He's exalted at the right hand of God.
Which, by the way, let me just interject this, Jase. That thought, because I had a meeting yesterday about Easter Sunday. That's what I want to preach Easter Sunday. We usually just focus on the resurrection of Jesus, which is great. I mean, that's always a good thing to do. But I've been thinking since we've been studying this book about what does that mean for us. So I'm preaching that one. I'm preaching that one Easter Sunday. I'm getting fired up about
that.
It.
We shall be like him is quite a statement.
Yeah.
But it's like once he does that, he pivots. And when he says, and you brought this up, I think the last podcast, who knows the order at which they're delivered.
Maddie.
But it says 1 John 3:3, it says, everyone who has this hope, which he starts off talking about being born.
Yeah.
And then he talks about, what happens when he comes back. But he also throws that in at the last verse of 1 John 2, where it says, if you know that he is righteous, you know that everyone who does what is right has been born of him. And we had done another rabbit hole about how righteousness, God's righteousness, kind of equates his faithfulness also.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot in there about he is faithful.
Yeah.
And so then he does it again, where it's like, this is going to happen, but what's that look like now? And so he brings that up. Everyone who has this hope in him purifies himself just as he is pure. And then he has this strange verse that says, everyone who sins breaks the law. In fact, sin is lawlessness. So I had brought up the fact, because I think when you think of the law, your mind usually goes to the Ten Commandments,
Right.
which is summed up.
Or the 600 and whatever that's recorded, or however you're viewing law, it's one of those.
Well,
two,
right. You think about Moses, and I had brought up Exodus 33 about this revealing of God's glory in that process. But once I kind of studied that in depthly, I added this 1 John 3:4 because I thought, man, here comes Jesus who sums up the law by saying, introducing this aspect of, the relationship with the Father, and he's destroying the barriers to that, giving us access. But he sums up the law saying, love God and love your neighbor, which if you look at the Ten Commandments, well, half of them is about your relationship with God, and the other half is your relationship with people.
Everybody else.
I think the stories that we tell our kids, the stories that we tell each other is very important. So I'm super excited about our friend Tim Tebow came out with an amazing new book. I've been reading it to my kids. It's called If the Tree Could Speak.
We had Tim on the podcast. Of course, Zach was kind of fanboying, but because he's a big fan. But Jase, the book is outstanding.
It is outstanding. I'm not a big book reader besides the Bible, but I've made an exception for this, and I think you will absolutely love this.
So it walks through Jesus' crucifixion from the perspective of the cross, which is very unique and different. And the idea is, so the cross is the one like speaking into the story, because the cross, if you think about it, was the closest witness to everything that happened on the day Jesus was crucified. It's well written. It's beautifully illustrated. It makes you slow down and really feel the weight of what Jesus did for us. Even if you've heard the Easter story 1,000 times, this one will challenge you and deepen your faith. What you get from this book will stick with you long after you put it down. And you'll want to pick it up year after year as you prepare to celebrate Easter. One of the things I loved about it is the tree in the story thinks that his only role is to be an execution place, but then he realizes his real job was to hold Jesus up as the Savior of the world. Very powerful. Step inside the story, hear the witness, and experience Easter like never before. Check out Tim Tebow's book, If the Tree Could Speak, on Amazon. That's If the Tree Could Speak by Tim Tebow. Order your copy on Amazon today.
So you start saying, "Oh, this is kind of making sense," and so when I went to Exodus 33, and we had teased that because I realized that this glory being revealed, and how Jesus ultimately became a better Moses. That's Hebrews 3, which is fascinating, and I'd like to read that at some point in this. That we get to not only share in God's love, but God's glory. Now, you have a hint of that when you think about when he comes back, we shall be like him. We get this glorified state. But there's also, when you read Exodus 33, you feel this, there's something about God being pleased with us that is equated with receiving God's glory.
Yeah.
And he says that directly. course, the reason I brought up the sin is lawlessness, because, I don't know how y'all would define that, but it made me think, well, you can't really understand Exodus 33 unless you get the whole story here. And Exodus 32 is probably one of the top 5 most controversial stories in the Bible, because it seemingly has God changing his mind. Some of the translations actually put that.
Yeah.
Because when you get the context here, Moses is chosen to be Israel's representative, although he was raised by the Egyptians.
Right.
And so it's like he didn't really have a relationship with them, and then God, interestingly enough, chooses him. And then you kind of have this picture, kind of like he's the new Noah, because you remember when God chose Noah to survive the planet, basically, he builds an ark and he builds the ark with pitch and however it's described. Make the ark out of gopher wood and all this. And you say, what's that got to do with Moses? Well, the little basket that he was in, it's the same word for the ark is used. Right. And it's he
was saved by an ark.
Well, yeah, and he uses the pitch and all that, and you're like, ooh, I see a pattern develop where God raises up a person to be a representative. And this is all shadowing ultimately what Jesus, being the ultimate human expression, would envision. So having said all that,
and another little caveat, Jase, is that Moses was born. Even though he was raised by the Egyptians, he was born from the Levitical tribe.
Exactly.
So he's a priest. Because we think of Aaron as being the first priest, but actually Moses had the same pedigree that he could be a priest as well, which is going to be a major kind of like backdrop of the story.
So you have the whole Exodus story, which is hard to sum up in a couple minutes, but we get to this point of having the commandments. He leads them out of the wilderness this 40 years, and you seem like, okay, God's going to give his law, they're going to be his people. Well, then, Moses and God have this conversation, and while they're having the conversation,
because it was like a 40-day conversation.
Yeah, for 40 days, which is so bizarre. He's up in the cloud and having a conversation with the Almighty God. Mm-hmm. Meanwhile, the people, God's chosen people, the Israel nation, they're busy building a golden calf.
Yeah.
And this is in 32. And so maybe we should just read this. I'm doing this off the top of my head. But this
Exodus 32?
Yeah. I wanted to bring this up. And if you're wondering why we're doing this, you're seeing what God has provided. Fast forward to 1 John, but when you read that, sin is lawlessness, and you have this first law being given, or the 10 Commandments as a way to show the character of God, summing up loving God and loving your neighbor.
Because you made the point, Jase, that before you read it, that Moses was raised in the house of Pharaoh, and then the people were separate, remember, because they were enslaved, but they were also in Egyptian culture. So this kind of running back to the other gods, I think, is kind of their natural instinct. It's always been my belief, why they did what they did, but go ahead.
So anyway, so that's where we're at the golden calf. I don't know where we want to pick up there. I want to get to this conversation. In verse 7 of Exodus 32, then the Lord said to Moses, go down. And this is interesting, the way the verbiage is, because your people, whom you brought up out of Egypt, have become corrupt.
They're not my people anymore.
Yep. They have been quick to turn away from what I commanded them, and have made themselves an idol cast in the shape of a calf. They have bowed down to it and sacrifice to it, and have said, These are your gods, O Israel, who brought you up out of Egypt. I have seen these people, the Lord said to Moses, and they're a stiff-necked people. Now, leave me alone, or some translations, give me rest, so that my anger may burn against them and that I may destroy them. Then I'll make you into a great nation. So you realize what he just said there?
It's another reset.
He's like, okay. And look, and God would be justified because they are not doing what they were created to
Right.
image him, and he's given them every opportunity.
In fact, it goes, the very first command was that. There's only one God, it's me.
Now remember, I prefaced all this by saying this is one of the more controversial passages in the Bible,
Yeah.
and I do not claim to be a scholar on this, but I thought we could discuss it because I think it's going to help us understand how us post-Jesus' death, burial, and resurrection and the pouring out of the Spirit can have a relationship, be included in the fellowship, partnership, participation with God Almighty.
Right.
I think you see a window into this right here. So that's the reset. So Moses, verse 11, but Moses sought the favor of the Lord his God. O Lord, he said, why should your anger burn against your people, whom you brought out of Egypt with great power and a mighty hand? Why should the Egyptians say, it was the evil intent that he brought them out, to kill them in the mountains and to wipe them off the face of the earth? Which is kind of shocking that Moses had the courage to say this.
Pretty bold.
He's like, well, they're going to think that you're evil.
Yeah.
I mean, it's kind of a PR thing. That was his first point. He was like, what is the public perception? Then his second point is this. He says, turn from your fierce anger, relent, and do not bring disaster on your people. Now, that word relent is where all the controversy comes in, because some other translations are change your mind or comfort
Repented.
yourself. Say that again,
Yeah.
Zach?
I think I've heard maybe the phrase repented, like does God change his
yeah,
mind?
yeah.
The King James Version says repent.
Yeah.
But relent, you see why they did, because there's other passages, like there's one in Malachi that says, God doesn't change his plans.
Yeah.
So you're like, all right, well, let's keep reading. Now, here's his second point. His first one was a PR thing. He's going to say, well, they're going to say that you have evil intent, that, you brought us out and then you kill us. Remember your servants, Abraham, Isaac, and Israel, to whom you swore by your own self. I will make your descendants as numerous as the stars in the sky, and I will give your descendants all this land. I promise them, and it will be their inheritance forever. So that's the second point. First one is bad PR. It's going to make you look bad. And two, you made a promise, which is, now that to me is not only bold, but it's interesting because he's like, well, didn't you make that promise that all these nations,
But if you think about it theoretically, he could still fulfill that promise through Moses.
True.
Back to one. So
I think that's a really good point, because that's going to help you wrap your head around this. God's plan could still be accomplished.
right. Because he'd already done it with Noah, as you pointed out.
So it's not like he's getting him to change his plan, but just in the short term, it's basically like a prayer saying, you made a promise. This is, and Moses is like,
I've got my opinion, but I'll wait till we get there. So, Zach, as you get a little older, sometimes it's a little hard to get that weight off.
Yeah, I'm getting older. I don't know what else there's to fill in.
I've done the keto, the paleo, the Weight Watchers, the fasting, and it usually comes down to willpower with these things. And so, you lose the weight, you gain it back, and so you did this tug of war. But one of the things I found out from my good friends at PhD Weight Loss, Dr. Ashley Lucas, is that it's really more about resetting metabolism, which God designed. in us to burn fat. It's a great plan. It obviously works. It's worked for me. And they identify that and they teach that to you. And they also walk alongside you with support. Heather is my counselor that I talk to once a week, and she helps me stay on track. If you're watching this on YouTube, here's a picture of me at the beginning. Here I am some 80 pounds later, looking much better, feeling better. Able to exercise now, get out, just had an ice apocalypse clean up, and I was able to get out there and do it, play with the kids, things I wouldn't have been able to do that much heavier. So if you call now, they'll give you 2 free weeks in the program and pay for your food so you can finally see real results without more of the old trial and error. If you're done with yo-yo dieting and you want clarity, call PhD Weight Loss now and mention Al. No more guessing, just answers. And call them at 864-644-1900 and say Al. That's 864-644-1900, or you can visit myphdweightloss.com.
So then, verse 14, then the Lord, here's where the controversial verse is. Exodus 32:14. Then the Lord relented and did not bring on his people the disaster he had threatened. So there it is. So Moses turned, went down the mountain. Now this is not humorous, but because when
But it's kind of funny.
it is, with the 2 tablets of the testimony in his hand. So he's got the 10 commandments here. They were inscribed on both sides, front and back. And remember, these tablets contain half the commandments were about your relationship with God, and half of them were a relationship with people. The tablets were the work of God. The writing was the writing of God engraved on the tablets. Then Joshua heard the noise of the people shouting. He said to Moses, "There's a sound of war in the camp." Moses replied, "It is not the sound of victory. It is not the sound of defeat. It is the sound of singing that I hear." And when Moses approached the camp and saw the calf and the dancing, his anger burned, and he threw the tablets out of his hands, breaking them to pieces at the foot of the mountain. And he took the calf they had made and burned it in the fire. Then he ground it to powder, scattered it on the water, and made the Israelites drink it.
It's like a bad tonic.
And so then it gets, there's another rabbit hole here, because then some of them wind up dying and being sacrifices, and so
there's a big fire that breaks out at some point.
Yeah. And so if I skip down to verse 31, it says, "So Moses went back to the Lord and said, 'Oh, what a great sin these people have committed. They have made themselves gods of gold. But now please forgive their sin. But if not, then blot me out of the book you have written.'" And I wanted to read this because I think you see some similarities of him being able or willing to sacrifice himself to make atonement for the people. The Lord replied to Moses, "Whoever has sinned against me, I will blot out of my book. Now, go lead the people to the place I spoke of, and my angel will go before you. However, when the time comes for me to punish, I will punish them for their sin." And the Lord struck the people with a plague because of what had happened with the calf Aaron had made. So there's multiple intercessions that take place along the road. And so when you get to 33 in verse 12, Moses said to the Lord, "You have been telling me, lead these people, but you have not let me know whom you will send with me. You have said, I know you by name, and you have found favor with me. If you are pleased with me, teach me your ways so I may know you and continue to find favor with you. Remember that this nation is your people." The Lord replied, "My presence will go with you, and I will give you rest." Then Moses said, "If your presence does not go with us, do not send us up from here. How will anyone know that you are pleased with me?" So we have another intercession. I think there's 5 in total. "And with your people, unless you go with us. What else will distinguish me and your people from all other people on the face of the earth?" And the Lord said to Moses, "I will do the very thing you've asked, because here's what I wanted to get to. I am pleased with you, and I know you by name. And that's why I said this is going to contribute to this glory aspect. Then Moses said, now show me your glory. And the Lord said, I will cause all my goodness to pass in front of you, and I will proclaim my name, the Lord, in your presence. I will have mercy on whom I have mercy, and I will have compassion on whom I have compassion. But he said, you cannot see my face, for no one may see me and live. Then the Lord said, there's a place near me where you may stand on a rock. When my glory passes by, I will put you in a cleft in the rock, cover you with my hand until I have passed by. Then I will remove my hand, and you will see my back, but my face must not be seen. So that's the story that was the introduction to the law being given.
Right.
And it's quite the story.
Quite the story.
But you have heaven and earth being, what are the words?
I would call it an intersection.
Yeah, it's an intersection, and you have a representative,
Yep.
and people are involved, and you have this human interaction with Moses who's basically saying, don't do it this way, and God relents and says, okay. Then Moses goes down and just loses it.
Right.
And the process goes on, but it was altered somewhat, however you want to use that, with God relenting. And then you have this idea of glory. And the point I want to make, because I know that was a long, we're basically summing up something from 30,000 feet in a few minutes. But you see how when Jesus came, it fulfilled all this in the greatest way possible for humans and God to dwell
Which is
together.
that word presence. That's where you're getting that. It's the presence.
Yeah.
Exactly. So
Exactly.
here's my opinion on the way that went down. I think God, it was always going to be about Moses. In other words, God doesn't get surprised on things. And so when we look at that word repent, relent, change, God knew always what was going to happen because he's outside of time and space, but he works inside because of us. Yeah. So I think the whole point was he knew Moses was going to come down and look at those people, and he would have been ready to fry them, which he was. He was so disgusted with them, and he breaks the thing, and he makes the sin and tonic drink for him, and it's just like, this is a terrible situation, but God had to let Moses get there on his own. It was really interesting because I think he knew what was going to happen, so he kind of provided a, what would you call it, like a narrative where he's like, I'll just wipe him out and go with you. But Moses like, oh, no. Of course, Moses hadn't seen it yet.
Exactly.
And God has seen it. So he's like, oh, no, we can't do that for the reasons you mentioned. But he knew Moses was going to see it, be so infuriated with him, and then still, at the end of the day, love him. And I love what the point you made, be willing to sacrifice himself.
Yeah.
For the sake of the people, which was very, very powerful. And it is the Hebrew writer tells us, it is like a bit of an analogy to Christ. And
I'd say, the word is, it's a typology.
Typology, there you go.
You see it in the Old Testament, and it's a copy of Christ to come. The Hebrew writer uses that language, copy versus the real thing.
Shadow,
but one of the things, one of the things you see here too is, if the promised land, if that's a typological kind of precursor of the new heavens and the new earth, because they're in the journey, like we're in the new Exodus, right? So we're in an Exodus right now, and we are awaiting to enter into the promised land. And so where I think this kind of matches up with current, like where we are all at, is how many of us have sat in churches for all of our lives, and we thought that the heaven, the promised land, was a place we were going to get to go to one day. And when we got there, then all the pain would be gone, and we could do what we wanted to do and live autonomously in our existence there. And that's kind of how we viewed it. That's how I viewed it. I mean, yeah, sure, you had the idea of worshiping God there, but it was like that's something that we did there. It wasn't like the core of the whole thing. But what you're seeing in this story, as Moses is going, and he's basically saying, I don't. The place doesn't matter to me if your presence isn't there. What makes the place the promised land? Like the prize is that you go with me. So if you're not going with me, I'm not going. And I think that is probably the most important truth of all of the scripture. And it's why when you read the book of Exodus, I think it's why I read the book of Exodus, not primarily through the lens of God making an atonement for his people. That does happen. I mean, Moses makes a sacrifice at the altar of the mountain and all that, and then he builds the tabernacle, and then they have the whole offering there. But the point of the whole thing is to be in the presence of God. That is why God told them in Exodus 25 to make the tabernacle so that he may be present or he may dwell with his people. So to me, in this moment, Moses is honestly, I think he picked up on the point of the whole thing. He's like, wait, hold on. If you ain't going, then why do I need to go? I'm not going to do this without you because you are the point of the whole thing.
So I think you're right, Zach, and Paul uses the same thing you just described in 1 Corinthians 10 and also in 2 Corinthians, the first 3 or 4 chapters, that he uses this that Jase just read as an illustration of exactly how it is for us, like you talked about the second Exodus, because he said it was like they were baptized. Remember when they're going through the Red Sea, because you had the cloud above, the water on the side. So the whole nation comes out. So there's this like symbolic baptism that they go through. But remember, a whole generation of those people died in the desert because of stuff like this.
Oh, exactly.
They didn't even make it. So then you get to the shores of the Promised Land. They're in the Jordan River. Remember, it was in flood stage in the book of Joshua. And guess what? He does another miraculous parting. And then the group that's now the new group, they, in essence, are baptized again. But it's a whole new generation to go into this. So he uses these languages to show us about this idea of dying to ourselves and then living in him and in his hand. And so even through the physical stuff of the Old Testament, it shows you the beauty of it for us. Now we get to literally experience it because the Holy Spirit of God lives in us. So that presence now, instead of being in the land, he's right here.
That's why I wanted to bring it up, because even with Noah, the same thing happened after the flood went down. Remember, look, he had a conversation with God on the top of a mountain.
Yep.
And it says the ark rested on the top.
Yeah.
It's the same language. And you fast forward in the book of Exodus, you know how the letter ends? The last paragraph is in 40:34. When they set up the tabernacle, it says, "Then the cloud covered the tent of meeting, and the glory of the Lord filled the tabernacle." To your point, Al, Moses could not enter the tent of meeting because the cloud had settled upon it, and the glory of the Lord filled the tabernacle. And all the travels of the Israelites, whenever the cloud lifted from above the tabernacle, they would set out. But if the cloud did not lift, they did not set out until the day it lifted. So the cloud of the Lord was over the tabernacle by day, and fire was in the cloud by night, in the sight of all the house of Israel during all their travels. And so it gives you this idea. The whole point of this is God wanting to dwell with people. Going back to the first sin and this division that happened, God initiates this plan.
Right.
And you fast forward to the book of Hebrews, and I feel like we were set up to read that. And this is going to help us understand why John goes to Cain. Because look, that's the first time the word sin is mentioned.
Right.
When he's like, remember, sin is crouching at your door.
Yeah.
And it helps you understand why you have a statement like this: sin is lawlessness. And sin is described in various forms, either iniquity, transgression, and all these have different meanings.
Right.
Even sin itself is used not just, I broke the moral code, but you missed the mark. And that phrase is used all over the Hebrew letters in just like somebody shooting an arrow. I forgot where that passage is, but it's like, and you missed.
Yeah.
But it
Missed the
uses
mark.
that word for sin.
Right.
This is not what you were created
Right.
to be doing.
Right.
And
And by one statement that John says there lets you know that once sin is unleashed, which is why I think he goes to Cain, because that was right after, Adam and Eve. You see what happens when sin is unleashed. In other words, when that's what happens, that's the lawlessness that comes in, because once it's rampant and that's the way you live, it destroys everything in its path. That's what it does. I mean, the whole world got flooded.
It's like a cancer.
Yes.
Sin's like a cancer. I heard this one time. It was about theological liberalism, like when basically it invades a church and they move away from the core teachings of the Christian faith, and the phrase was, but you could interchange it with sin, that sin doesn't grow anything, it only grows in things.
Yeah,
and so it enters in like a COVID virus, and it starts to spread, and it's one of the reasons why you take it serious. As it invades the world, as it enters in, it starts to spread, and the only cure is you have to kill it. You be killing sin, or sin will be killing you.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the idea of the picture.
I want to read this. So in Hebrews 2, you say, well, why did God become a man? And verse 14, it says, since the children have flesh and blood, he too shared in their humanity, so that by his death he might destroy him who holds the power of death, that is the devil, and free those who all their lives were held in slavery by their fear of death. And then verse 17, it says, for this reason he had to be made like his brothers in every way, in order that he might become a merciful and high priest in service to God, the truest representative.
Yep.
And that he might make atonement for the sins of the people. Because he suffered when he was tempted, he is able to help those. And so when it gets to chapter 3, it says, since we share in the heavenly calling, fix your thoughts on Jesus.
Yeah.
Verse 2 of chapter 3. He was faithful to the one who appointed him, just as Moses was faithful in all God's house. But Jesus has been found worthy of greater honor than Moses, just as the builder of a house has greater honor than the house itself. For every house is built by someone, but God is the builder of everything. Moses was faithful as a servant in all of God's house, testifying to what would be said in the future. But Christ is faithful. Remember when I brought up that faithful as far as what's right?
Yep.
As a son over God's house, and we are his house. That's how God brought this to a personal, intimate level. We are now God's house, and he fills us up with fire and his presence.
Yeah.
If we hold on to our courage. So then it says, he quotes a psalm here. So if you hear his voice, do not harden your hearts as you did in the rebellion during the time of testing in the desert, where your fathers tested and tried me, and for 40 years saw what I did. That is why I was angry with that generation. Their hearts are always going astray.
Yeah.
We just read it.
Yep.
So I declared on oath in my anger, they shall never enter my rest. Well, there's that concept again.
Yeah.
God's rest. See to it, brothers, that none of you has a sinful, unbelieving heart that turns away from the living God, but encourage one another daily, as long as it is called today, so that none of you may be hardened by sin's deceitfulness. We have come to share in Christ if we hold firmly to the end the confidence we had
At the first.
Yeah, at the first. And I think you see this, John mirroring this concept in this in a different way.
Right.
And I think it was helpful to look at the historical aspect of this, to kind of wrap your head on for us today, to say, oh, I get it.
Right. And the fact that, like I mentioned in 2 Corinthians, that in their day they looked at Moses. Remember, he had the glory, and it would be fading, and had to veil his face. And what's interesting is, in a certain way, Moses did sacrifice himself, because he didn't cross over either. He died on that mountain, overlooking it.
Yeah.
But it was like he was that final sacrifice for that last passage, and then Joshua took the next group in, which is, pretty amazing.
And I wanted to say in closing, it's like even in my treasure hunt, I found all these bullets and all. But look, you know what hits me when you're thinking about these things? There was a time where we as a nation, we're shooting those things at each other.
Yeah.
And you know why? Because we're not valuing humans being made by God. We all have the same God. And I thought, we lost our our love for God and our love for one another, and this is the result.
It's a good point, because those bullets were piled up there. They were meant for the hearts of your neighbor.
Exactly.
Which shows you what happens when sin reigns. All right, we're out of time. We'll pick it up here next time on Unashamed. Thanks for listening to the Unashamed podcast. Help us out by leaving a rating and review on Apple Podcasts. And don't miss an episode by subscribing on YouTube. And be sure to click the little bell and choose all notifications to watch every episode.